Josie's hands stopped shaking the moment the rope bit into her wrists. She had learned that lesson months ago. Fear was a luxury she could no longer afford. The auctioneer's voice rolled over the crowd like thunder selling horses, cattle, broken tools. And then he pointed at her. "Throw the woman in for free. She ain't worth the feed." Laughter exploded around her. Men she had never wronged looked at her like she was less than the dirt beneath their boots. But one man didn't laugh. If you want to see what happens next, subscribe to our channel, follow Josie's story to the very end, and comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The July sun beat down on Copper Hollow like a punishment from God himself. Silas Brennan pulled his hat lower and wiped the sweat from his brow. He hadn't wanted to come to the auction. These places always left a bad taste in his mouth. Too many desperate men, too much greed hanging in the air like smoke from a brush fire. But desperation had a way of dragging a man where he didn't want to go. 2 of his best horses had gone down with colic 3 weeks back. Without replacements, his ranch would bleed dry before autumn. So here he stood, shoulder to shoulder with men who smelled of whiskey and impatience, waiting for something worth buying. "You look like someone stole your breakfast, Brennan." Silas turned. Colt Dawson leaned against the fence rail hat, pushed back, grinning like a man who'd never worked a hard day in his life. "Ain't here for conversation, Dawson." "Never are." Colt spat in the dirt. "Heard you lost them horses. Bad luck." "Luck ain't got nothing to do with it." "That's so." Colt's grin widened. "Maybe it's that cursed land of yours. Maybe it's time you sold and moved on." Silas felt his jaw tighten. The Brennan Ranch had been in his family for 2 generations. His father had built the house with his own hands. His mother had planted the oak tree by the well the year Silas was born. He would die before he sold. "You got business here, Dawson? Or you just come to flap your gums?" Colt laughed and pushed off the rail. "Easy, cowboy. Just making conversation." He tipped his hat and disappeared into the crowd. Silas exhaled slowly. Men like Colt were everywhere in Copper Hollow, loud, lazy, always looking for an angle. He'd learned long ago not to waste words on them. The auctioneer climbed onto the platform, a wiry man with a voice like a rusty hinge. He started with cattle, then moved to equipment, then finally to horses. When the 2 bay mares were led into the ring, Silas straightened. They weren't pretty. Their coats were dull ribs showing through their hides. But their legs were strong, their eyes clear. These were horses that had been neglected, not ruined. The bidding started low. $20, someone called. $25, another voice answered. Silas waited. He had $43 in his pocket, every cent he could scrape together. He couldn't afford to bid too early. 30. 32. The voices dropped away. Men shook their heads, muttered about feed prices, about the drought creeping up from the south. Silas raised his hand. 35. The auctioneer's eyes found him. 35 from the gentleman in the back. "Do I hear 40? Silence. 35 going once, going twice. "Hold on now." A new voice cut through the crowd. Silas turned to see a heavy-set man pushing forward, gold watch chain glinting on his vest. Wade Pollard. Silas knew him by reputation, a man who bought cheap and sold dear, who had connections to powerful people back east. $40, Pollard said, smiling. Silas's stomach dropped. He only had $3 left after 35. 41, he said anyway. Pollard turned, eyebrows raised. "Well now, Mr. Brennan, isn't it the one with the cursed ranch?" A few men chuckled. 42, Pollard said, not breaking eye contact. Silas felt heat rise in his chest. He had 43. If he bid it all, he'd have nothing left for feed, for supplies, for anything. But without horses, he had nothing anyway. 43. The crowd went quiet. Pollard studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. "Keep them. I've got better things to spend my money on." The gavel came down. Sold to Mr. Brennan for $43. Silas let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His hands were shaking slightly as he moved toward the ring to claim his horses. That's when the auctioneer spoke again. "Oh, and Brennan take the woman too. She comes with the lot." Silas stopped dead. "What?" The auctioneer jerked his thumb toward the back of the ring. "Came in with the stock. No papers, no name worth keeping. She's worthless, but she's yours if you want her." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone whistled. Another man clapped slowly, mockingly. Silas turned. She stood in the shadow of the horse's wrists, bound with rough rope dress, torn and stained with dirt. Her dark hair hung loose around her face, tangled and unwashed. She didn't look up, didn't move. She stood perfectly still, like a woman who had learned that drawing attention only made things worse. "I didn't buy a woman," Silas said, his voice harder than he intended. "Didn't charge you for her either." The auctioneer shrugged. "Do what you want. Leave her here, she'll be someone else's problem by sundown." Another wave of laughter. Silas felt something cold settle in his gut. He looked at the men around him, at Colt Dawson's smirk, at Pollard's calculating gaze, at the dozen other faces that saw nothing wrong with this. He thought of his mother, how she'd worked herself to the bone, keeping the ranch alive after his father died, how the neighbors had called her foolish, stubborn, a woman who didn't know her place. "What's her name?" Silas asked. The auctioneer blinked. "What?" "Her name." "Does she have one?" "Hell if I know. She don't talk. Tried her in kitchens, tried her in fields. Useless as a three-legged mule." He waved his hand dismissively. "Take her or leave her, Brennan. I ain't got all day." Silas looked at the woman again. She still hadn't moved, hadn't raised her head. But he noticed her hands, bound tight fingers, curled into fists. Not loose and defeated. Clenched. "Untie her." The laughter stopped. "What?" The auctioneer's smile faltered. "I said untie her." Silas stepped forward. "She ain't cargo." A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone muttered something about fool cowboys and lost causes. The auctioneer hesitated, then shrugged again. "Your funeral." He gestured to a boy nearby. "Cut her loose." The boy scrambled forward with a knife slicing through the rope. The woman's hands fell to her sides. She swayed slightly, then steadied herself against the nearest horse fingers, curling into its mane. Silas handed over his $43, every cent he had, and took the lead ropes. "Come on," he said to the horses. Then quieter to the woman. "You too, if you want." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked out of the ring, the horses following behind him. He was halfway across the yard when he heard its soft footsteps in the dirt behind him. She was following. The road back to the ranch stretched long and dusty under the afternoon sun. Silas walked in silence, leading the horses, his mind churning. What had he done? He could barely feed himself. Now he had two half-starved horses, and a woman who might be mad, might be dangerous, might be anything at all. He glanced back. She walked a few paces behind, head still lowered, arms wrapped around herself despite the heat. Her boots were cracked and worn thin. Her dress looked like it had been dragged through every mud pit in Montana. But she kept pace, didn't falter, didn't complain. After an hour, Silas stopped near a creek to let the horses drink. He pulled a canteen from his saddlebag and took a long swallow, then held it out to the woman. She hesitated. "It's water," he said. "Just water." Slowly she took the canteen. Her hands trembled slightly as she drank, but she didn't gulp it down like a desperate person would. She took measured sips, careful, controlled. When she handed it back, their eyes met for the first time. Hers were brown, flecked with gold. Sharp. Aware. Not the eyes of a broken woman. "Thank you," she said. Silas nearly dropped the canteen. "You talk." "Yes." "They said you didn't." "They said many things." Her voice was quiet but steady. "Not all of them true." Silas stared at her. A dozen questions crowded his mind, but he pushed them down. The sun was getting lower. They had miles to go. "What's your name?" She hesitated, something flickering in her eyes. Caution, maybe, or calculation. "Josie," she said finally. "Josephine Mercer." The name meant nothing to him, but the way she said it carefully, like she was testing whether it was safe to speak, told him there was more to the story. "Silas Brennan," he said. "I've got a ranch about 5 miles from here. Small. Ain't much, but it's dry and there's food." "Why?" The question caught him off guard. "Why what? Why help me?" She met his gaze directly now. "You don't know me. I could be anyone. A thief, a murderer, mad." "Are you?" "No." "Then I reckon we're fine." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, so faintly, he almost missed it. The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Come on," Silas said, turning back to the road. "We're burning daylight." The Brennan Ranch sat in a shallow valley, sheltered by low hills on 3 sides. The house was small, but solid whitewashed walls, a porch with 2 chairs, a chimney that had seen better days. When they arrived, Silas led the horses to the corral and showed Josie the bunkhouse behind the barn. "You can stay here," he said. "There's a bed, a stove, a pump for water out back. It ain't fancy, but it's more than I've had in months." Her voice was matter-of-fact, not pitiful. She walked inside, looking around at the narrow bed, the wooden table, the single window that faced the hills. "I'll bring food," Silas said, "and something to wear that ain't falling apart." She turned to face him. For a moment, something moved behind her eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or surprise that anyone would offer such simple kindness. "Why?" she asked again. "You could have left me there. You still can. I won't blame you." Silas thought about it. Thought about the smart thing to do, the safe thing, the thing any sensible man would choose. Then he thought about the way those men had laughed at her, the way Pollard had looked at her not like a person, but like property. "My mother used to say a person's worth ain't decided by the people who want to tear them down," he said. "It's decided by what they do when they get back up." Josie's eyes widened slightly. "You don't know anything about me." "No," Silas agreed. "But I know what I saw today, and I know the kind of men who were bidding against me." He paused at the door. "Get some rest. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow." He left before she could respond. That night, Silas sat on his porch watching the stars wheel overhead. The ranch was quiet. The horses settled in the corral. The woman Josie was somewhere in the bunkhouse doing God knew what. He should be worried. Should be planning how to undo this mess. How to find her somewhere else to go. How to get his life back to normal. But for the first time in months, the knot in his chest felt looser. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the horses. Maybe it was the fact that for once, he'd done something that felt right instead of just practical. Or maybe it was the way Josie had looked at him, not with fear or suspicion, but with something that might have been hope. Silas shook his head and went inside. Tomorrow would bring its own troubles. Tonight, he'd sleep. In the bunkhouse, Josie sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap. She hadn't expected kindness. Hadn't expected anything except another buyer, another cage, another set of chains, invisible or otherwise. But the cowboy hadn't looked at her the way the others did. Hadn't talked about what she was worth or what she could do for him. He'd asked her name. Such a small thing. Such a dangerous thing. Josephine Mercer. The name still fit even after everything they'd done to strip it away from her. The Mercer family thought she was dead or close enough. They'd sold her to make sure of it. But she wasn't dead. And now in this small room on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, she had something she hadn't had in months. Time. Space. A chance to think. Josie looked out the window at the dark hills. She had secrets. Dangerous ones. The kind that powerful men killed to protect. If Silas Brennan knew what she really was, what she carried in her mind, he might not be so kind. But for now, she was safe. For now, that was enough. She lay down on the bed, closed her eyes, and waited for morning. Morning came with the sound of a hammer striking wood. Silas paused in the doorway of his house, coffee in hand, and stared. Josie stood at the corral fence mending a broken rail. Her sleeves were rolled past her elbows, her hair tied back with a strip of cloth, and she moved with a quiet efficiency that spoke of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. He walked toward her. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." She didn't look up. "This board was loose. Figured I'd fix it before the horses tested it." "You know how to work wood." "I know how to work." She drove another nail home. "That a problem?" Silas watched her for a moment. Her hands were steady, her movements precise. This wasn't the work of a woman raised soft. "No problem," he said. "Just wasn't expecting it." Josie finally looked at him. "You expected me to sit in that bunkhouse and wait for someone to tell me what to do? Most folks would." "I ain't most folks." Something shifted in the air between them. Silas felt it, a kind of recognition, one survivor seeing another. "Fair enough." He held out the coffee. "You hungry?" She hesitated, then took the cup. Their fingers brushed. She pulled back quickly, but not before he saw the flash of something in her eyes. Surprise, maybe that kindness could still catch her off guard. "There's bread inside," Silas said. "Butter too, if the heat hasn't spoiled it." "Thank you," she paused. "For everything." "Don't thank me yet. Day's just started." He turned toward the barn, but her voice stopped him. "Mr. Brennan?" "Silas." "Silas." She took a breath. "There are things you should know about me, about why I was at that auction." "I figured there would be. And you still brought me here." He looked back at her. "I brought you here because every man at that auction saw something they could use. I saw something they missed." "What's that?" "Someone worth helping." For a moment, Josie didn't speak. Her grip tightened on the coffee cup. "You might change your mind," she said quietly, "when you hear the truth." "Then tell me." She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the sound of hooves echoed from the road. Both of them turned. A rider was coming fast, kicking up dust in the morning light. As he got closer, Silas recognized the horse before the man. Reverend Thomas Ashford. The preacher pulled up hard, his horse snorting and stamping. His face was red, his eyes wide. "Silas!" He was breathing hard. "You need to hear this." "What's wrong?" Ashford's gaze flicked to Josie, then back to Silas. "There's men in town asking about her." Silas felt his stomach drop. "What men?" "3 of them. Rode in this morning. Got badges, but they ain't lawmen I've ever seen. One of them's named Pollard." Josie went still. The color drained from her face. "Wade Pollard?" she whispered. Ashford nodded grimly. "You know him. He's the one who sold me." The words hung in the air like smoke. Silas stepped closer. "Sold you?" Josie's jaw tightened. "I told you there were things you should know. The Mercer family. My family, they didn't just disown me. They paid Pollard to make me disappear. He sold me to a cattle outfit heading west. When they went bust, he sold me again. And again." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "He's not here by accident. He's here to finish what he started." Silas turned to Ashford. "What are they saying in town? That she's a runaway. That she's dangerous. That there's a reward for her return." The preacher shook his head. "People are listening, Silas. You know how this town works. They smell money, they stop asking questions." "How much?" $200. Silas felt the number hit him like a fist. $200 was more than most folks in Copper Hollow made in a year. For that kind of money, men would turn on their own mothers. "You should send me away," Josie said. Her voice was flat now, resigned. "If they find me here, they'll destroy you." Nobody's sending anybody anywhere. You don't understand. Then make me understand. Josie met his gaze. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she reached into her dress and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Her fingers trembled as she unwrapped it. Inside was a stack of papers, yellowed, creased, covered in handwriting. "These are letters," she said. "Contracts, records, proof that my father and his partners stole land from 3 families in Montana Territory. They bribed judges, forged deeds, ran people off their homes." She looked up at him. One of those families was named Brennan. Silas felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "What did you say?" "Your father's south pasture. The one he lost 10 years ago. It wasn't debt that took it." Josie's voice cracked. "It was my father." The silence that followed was deafening. Silas stared at her, his mind racing. The south pasture. His father had died believing he'd failed, that he'd lost the land through his own mistakes. His mother had worked herself into an early grave trying to make up for it, and it had been a lie. All of it. "Show me," he said. Josie handed him the papers. His hands shook as he read names, dates, signatures he didn't recognize, and one he did. Harold Mercer, her father. "Why are you carrying these?" His voice came out rough, harsh. "Because they're the only proof." Josie's eyes glistened. "When I found out what my family was doing, I made copies. I was going to take them to a real judge, someone they hadn't bought. But they caught me first." She swallowed hard. "They sold me to keep me quiet. These papers are the only reason I'm still alive. They don't know I have them." Ashford stepped forward. "If those documents are real, they could bring down some of the most powerful men in the territory." "They're real," Josie said, "and so is the target on my back." Silas looked at the papers, then at her. The anger was still there, hot and old and justified. But beneath it, he saw something else. A woman who had given up everything to do the right thing. "Pollard doesn't know you have these." "No. He thinks I'm just a loose end. Something to be cleaned up." "Then we don't give him the chance." Josie's eyes widened. "You can't fight them. There are 3 of them, and they have the law on their side or what passes for it. I ain't planning to fight them." Silas folded the papers carefully and tucked them inside his shirt. "I'm planning to beat them." Ashford raised an eyebrow. "How?" "The same way they beat my father. With paper." Silas looked at Josie. "You said copies were made. Where are the originals?" "In my father's study. In Boston." "Then we make these copies count." He turned to the preacher. "Thomas, you still got that friend at the territorial courthouse. The one who owes you a favor." "Judge Harlan. He's honest, but he's careful. He won't stick his neck out without good reason." $200 of reward money and 3 fake lawmen ain't reason enough." Ashford smiled grimly. "It might be." "Then ride. Fast. Tell him what's coming and show him these." Silas pulled out half the papers and handed them over. "If something happens to us, at least the truth gets out." The preacher took the documents, his face solemn. "You're a good man, Silas Brennan." "I'm a stubborn one. There's a difference." Ashford mounted his horse and rode hard toward the hills. When the dust settled, Silas turned back to Josie. "You should have told me sooner. Would you have believed me?" He thought about it. "Probably not." "Then I told you when it mattered." She stepped closer. "I'm sorry. About your father. About all of it. It wasn't your doing. My family's doing. Same blood. Blood don't make a person." Silas met her eyes. "Actions do." For a moment, neither of them moved. The heat pressed down on them heavy and thick. Then Josie did something unexpected. She reached out and touched his arm just briefly, just a brush of fingers against his sleeve. "Thank you," she said, "for not sending me away." "Don't thank me yet. Silas said again. But this time, there was something different in his voice, something softer. Before either of them could speak again, a new sound reached them. Hooves. Multiple riders. Coming from the direction of town. Silas grabbed Josie's arm. Inside, now. They ran. The house wasn't much, but it had thick walls and one door. Silas pushed Josie inside and grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace. Stay away from the windows. I can help. You can help by staying alive. He checked the rifle. Loaded. If they get past me, there's a root cellar behind the kitchen. It leads to the creek bed. You take those papers and you run. I won't leave you. You will if I tell you to. His voice was hard. Those documents are worth more than both of us. You understand? Josie's jaw tightened. She wanted to argue, he could see it in her eyes, but she nodded. Good. The riders pulled up outside. 3 men just like Ashford said. Pollard in the center badge gleaming on his vest, smile wide and cold. Mr. Brennan, Pollard called out. We'd like a word. Silas stepped onto the porch rifle, resting easy against his shoulder. Say your piece. Now that's not very friendly. Pollard dismounted slowly, hands visible. We're just looking for someone. A woman, believed to be dangerous. Word is you might know where she is. Word's wrong. Is it? Pollard's smile didn't waver. Because I got half a dozen witnesses who say you took her from the auction yesterday. Walked right out with her, like she was yours. I bought horses, that's all. And the woman. What woman? One of the other men, younger meaner, stepped forward. Don't play games, Cowboy. We know she's here. Silas didn't move. You got a warrant. The young man's face twisted. We don't need... Yes, you do. Silas cocked the rifle. This is my property. You want to search it, you bring paper from a real judge. Otherwise, you can turn around and ride back the way you came. Pollard held up a hand, calming his man. Easy now. No need for unpleasantness. He looked at Silas with something like respect, or maybe just calculation. You're a hard man to read, Brennan. Most folks in this town would have handed her over for half the reward. I ain't most folks. No, you ain't? Pollard mounted his horse. We'll be back, with that warrant. And when we come back, we'll tear this place apart board by board if we have to. He tipped his hat. Think about whether she's worth it. The riders turned and headed back toward town. Silas watched them go, rifle still raised, until they disappeared over the ridge. Then he let out a breath and went back inside. Josie stood in the kitchen, hands pressed flat against the table, breathing hard. They'll be back, she said. I know. You should have given me up. Maybe. Silas set the rifle down. But I didn't. Why? Her voice cracked. Why risk everything for someone you just met? Silas looked at her for a long moment. He thought about his father, about the land that was stolen, about the years of grief built on lies. Because my whole life, I've watched powerful men take what they want and call it justice. I've watched good people lose everything, while the ones who cheated them slept easy in soft beds. He stepped closer. You're the first person I've met who tried to fight back, who gave up everything to tell the truth. Josie's eyes filled with tears. I didn't give it up. They took it. Same difference. He reached out, hesitant, careful, and touched her shoulder. You're not alone anymore. You understand. Whatever comes next, we face it together. She stared at him. The tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. You're either the bravest man I've ever met, she whispered, or the most foolish. Probably both. For the first time since the auction, Josie smiled, really smiled. It transformed her face, softened the hard edges, lit something in her eyes that had been dark too long. Then God help us both, she said. Outside, the sun climbed higher, and somewhere in the distance thunder rumbled. A storm was coming. But for now, in this small house on the edge of nowhere, two people who had lost everything found something neither expected. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something more. The thunder grew closer as the afternoon wore on, but the rain held off like it was waiting for something worse to happen first. Silas stood at the window watching the road. Josie sat at the table behind him, sorting through the remaining documents, her hands moving with a quiet urgency. "They'll come before sundown," she said. "Pollard won't wait longer than he has to." "I know. You should leave. Take the horses' ride north. I can hold them off long enough." Silas turned. "We talked about this. And I'm talking about it again." Josie stood, her voice rising. "You've known me 2 days. 2 days, Silas. That's not worth dying for." "Ain't planning on dying. Neither did my father's other victims." Her jaw tightened. "I've seen what Pollard does to people who get in his way. He doesn't fight fair. He doesn't fight at all. He waits until you're weak, and then he strikes." "Then we don't give him the chance to wait." Before Josie could respond, a new sound cut through the tension. Not hooves this time, a wagon, creaking and slow, coming up the road from the west. Silas grabbed his rifle. "Stay here." He stepped onto the porch, weapon raised. The wagon rolled closer, and when he saw who was driving, he let out a breath. Hetty Rawlings. The old woman pulled her mule to a stop and climbed down with the stiff determination of someone who'd been doing hard things her whole life. She was 67 years old, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, and she'd been Silas's neighbor for as long as he could remember. "Put that rifle down, boy," she said. "You'll shoot your foot off." "Mrs. Rawlings, this ain't a good time." "I heard." She walked toward him, ignoring the rifle entirely. "Whole town's talking. 3 men with badges looking for a runaway woman. $200 reward." She stopped at the porch steps. "That her inside?" Silas hesitated. "Don't lie to me, Silas Brennan. I changed your diapers." "Yes, ma'am, she's inside." Hetty nodded. "Good. Then I came to the right place." She climbed the steps and walked past him into the house before he could stop her. Josie was on her feet when the old woman entered, eyes wide, body tense like a cornered animal. Hetty looked her up and down. "You the one causing all this fuss?" Yes." "You kill anybody?" "No." "Steal anything?" "No." "Then sit down and stop looking at me like I'm gonna bite." Hetty pulled out a chair and sat heavily. "Lord, my knees ain't what they used to be." Josie looked at Silas, bewildered. He shrugged. "Mrs. Rawlings," he said, "you shouldn't be here. Those men, I know exactly who those men are." Hetty's voice went hard. "Wade Pollard worked for Harold Mercer back when I was teaching school in Helena. He helped run out the Dalton family from their homestead, claimed they owed money they didn't owe. When Mr. Dalton tried to fight it, there was a fire. Whole family gone in one night." She looked at Josie. "That the kind of man who's chasing you?" Josie's face went pale. "Yes." "Then you picked the right place to run." Hetty reached into her bag and pulled out a wrapped bundle. "I brought food, and this." She set a small pistol on the table. "It was my husband's. Still shoot straight." "Mrs. Rawlings, don't start." She fixed Silas with a look that could have stopped a charging bull. "I've been living next to this ranch for 40 years. Your daddy was a good man. Your mama was a saint. And you..." She pointed at him. "You're the only one in this valley who ever helped me fix my roof without asking for payment. That was just being neighborly." "Exactly." She stood. "So now I'm being neighborly back." Josie stepped forward, her voice thick. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done, what my family..." "Girl, I've been alive long enough to know that blood ain't destiny." Hetty took her hand. "You're standing here in a stranger's house, scared half to death, and you're still trying to protect people you just met. That tells me everything I need to know." Josie's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you all so kind?" "Because somebody has to be." Hetty squeezed her hand. Now dry your eyes. We got work to do." The next hour passed in tense preparation. Silas secured the windows. Josie hid the remaining documents in the root cellar wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from damp. Hetty stationed herself by the kitchen window, with her husband's pistol ignoring every suggestion that she should leave. "I outlived 3 husbands, 2 droughts, and a grasshopper plague," she said. "I ain't scared of some fancy man with a fake badge." Silas was checking the rifle again when Josie appeared beside him. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "When Pollard was here before, you didn't even hesitate. You faced him down like it was nothing." She searched his face. "Weren't you afraid?" Silas thought about it. "Yeah, I was afraid. You didn't look it. Fear ain't the problem." He set the rifle down. "It's what you do with it. My daddy used to say that courage ain't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was." Silas's jaw tightened. "He was also the reason I know what your family did, what they took from us." Josie went still. "You must hate me." "I don't hate you." He met her eyes. "I hate what was done. But you're the one trying to make it right. That's the difference. It won't bring him back. Your father." "No, it won't." Silas took a breath. "But it might stop them from doing it to someone else." Before Josie could respond, Hetty called from the kitchen. "Riders coming?" Silas grabbed the rifle. "How many?" "4 this time. And they ain't alone." He moved to the window. His stomach dropped. Pollard was leading, flanked by his 2 men. But behind them came a dozen more riders. Townspeople. Men Silas recognized from the saloon, from the general store, from church. Men who'd known his family for years. "Lord have mercy," Hetty whispered. Josie appeared at Silas's shoulder. When she saw the crowd, her face went white. "They've turned the whole town." $200 is a lot of money. "It's not just that." Her voice was hollow. "Pollard knows how to work people. He tells them what they want to hear, makes them feel righteous. By the time they realize what they've done, it's too late." The riders stopped at the edge of the property. Pollard dismounted, straightening his coat like he was arriving at a social call. "Mr. Brennan." His voice carried easily in the still air. "I've got that warrant now, signed and sealed." He held up a folded paper. "You want to do this the easy way, or should we make it difficult?" Silas stepped onto the porch. "That warrant ain't worth the paper it's printed on." "Is that so?" Pollard smiled. "Judge Morrison signed it himself. You calling him a liar? I'm calling you one." A murmur ran through the crowd. Silas saw a few men shift uncomfortably. "Good. Let them think." "You know what I see, Pollard?" Silas kept his voice calm, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I see a man who works for people rich enough to buy judges and fake lawmen. I see a man who sells women like cattle and calls it justice. Careful, boy." Pollard's smile faltered. "You're making accusations you can't prove." "Can't I?" Silas reached inside his shirt and pulled out the documents. "These papers say different. Signed confessions, records of bribes, land deals that stole property from honest families, including mine." The crowd went quiet. One of the townsmen, Silas recognized him as Earl Hutchins, the blacksmith, stepped forward. "What's he talking about, Pollard?" "Nothing. Forgeries. The woman's desperate." "These ain't forgeries." Silas held up a page. "This is a letter from Harold Mercer to a Judge Atkins in Helena. It details exactly how much money changed hands to steal the Brennan South pasture." He looked at the crowd. "My father died believing he'd failed. My mother worked herself into the grave trying to make up for land we never actually lost. It was stolen. By men like him." Earl's face hardened. "That true?" Pollard laughed, but there was an edge to it now. "You're going to believe some stranger over—" "He ain't a stranger." Earl stepped closer. "I've known Silas Brennan his whole life. His daddy baptized my son." He looked at the other townsmen. Any of you remember when the Mercers bought up half the territory? How many families lost their land that year? A few men nodded, memories stirring. Coincidence? Earl shook his head. Or something else? Pollard's expression shifted. The friendly mask slipped, revealing something cold underneath. It doesn't matter what you believe. I have a warrant. I have the authority. And that woman is coming with me. He turned to his men. Take her. The two men moved toward the porch. Silas raised his rifle. First man who touches that door gets a hole in his chest. The men stopped. You'd shoot a lawman. Pollard's voice was silky. In front of all these witnesses. You ain't a lawman, and they ain't witnesses. Silas looked at the crowd. They're my neighbors. They know what's right and what's wrong, and they know what you are. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Earl Hutchins pulled his own pistol from his belt. He didn't point it at Silas. He pointed it at Pollard. I reckon we'd like to see those documents ourselves, Earl said, before anybody goes anywhere. Another man stepped forward, then another. One by one, the townspeople who had come to help Pollard turned, not all of them, but enough. Pollard's face twisted with rage. You don't know what you're doing. The Mercers will destroy this town. They'll burn you out, every one of you. Maybe. Earl cocked his pistol. But not today. Josie appeared in the doorway beside Silas. Wade, she said quietly. Pollard's eyes snapped to her. Something ugly flashed across his face. Hatred, yes, but also fear. Fear of a woman he'd tried to silence. The game's over, Josie continued. You can ride away right now. Take your men and go, or you can stay and watch everything fall apart. You think a few papers can stop them? Stop us? Pollard laughed, but it was wild, now desperate. Your father has connections in Washington, in New York. This is nothing. It's enough. Josie's voice was steady. Because I'm not the only one who knows. The Reverend has copies too, and by now so does Judge Harlan. Pollard went pale. That's right. She stepped onto the porch. You spent so much time chasing me, you forgot to watch your back. It's already done. The letters are sent. The truth is out. For a moment, Pollard looked like he might charge, might throw himself at her in one final act of fury. Then he looked at the guns. At the faces of men who had finally stopped believing his lies. This isn't over, he said. Yes, Josie replied. It is. Pollard mounted his horse. His men followed. The three of them rode hard toward the west, away from town, away from everything. As the dust settled, Earl Hutchins holstered his pistol and walked up to the porch. Miss, he said, tipping his hat to Josie, I don't know everything that happened here, but I know enough. You're welcome in Copper Hollow, long as you like. Thank you. Josie's voice wavered. I don't know what to say. Don't need to say nothing. Earl looked at Silas. Your daddy would be proud, boy. Silas's throat tightened. He nodded. One by one, the townspeople dispersed, riding back the way they came. The air felt lighter somehow, like a fever breaking. When they were gone, Hetty emerged from the house, pistol tucked back in her bag. Well, she said, that was exciting. Silas laughed, an honest, startled sound he hadn't made in longer than he could remember. Josie was trembling. The strength that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, replaced by the overwhelming weight of everything that had happened. It's over, she whispered. Is it really over? Silas turned to her. He saw the fear, the hope, the fragile disbelief. The worst part is, he said, what comes next might be harder. What comes next? Rebuilding. He reached out and took her hand. But you don't have to do it alone. Josie looked down at their joined hands. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I've been alone for so long. I forgot what this felt like. What? Belonging somewhere. Hetty cleared her throat loudly. All right, you two. Save the romance for later. I'm starving, and I didn't bring all this food just to watch it go cold. Silas released Josie's hand, face flushing. "Yes, ma'am." They went inside. For the first time in days, the house felt like a home. But even as they sat down to eat, even as laughter began to fill the quiet rooms, Silas knew the fight wasn't entirely over. Pollard was gone, but the Mercers remained. Men like Harold Mercer didn't forgive, didn't forget. Somewhere out there, the enemy was regrouping, and Silas had a feeling the final reckoning was still to come. But for now, just for now, he let himself enjoy the moment. The food, the company, the woman sitting across from him smiling like she'd finally found something worth holding on to. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. That was enough. 3 days passed without incident, and that worried Silas more than any gunfight could have. He woke before dawn. Each morning checked the horses, walked the perimeter of the property, watched the road. Nothing. No riders. No dust clouds. No sign of Pollard or anyone else. It felt like the calm before a storm that wouldn't break. Josie noticed. She didn't say anything, but he caught her watching him. Sometimes saw the question in her eyes that she was too careful to ask. On the 4th morning, she found him at the corral brushing down one of the bay mares. "You haven't slept." Silas didn't look up. "Slept enough." "Liar." She leaned against the fence rail. "You think they're coming back." "I know they're coming back." He set down the brush. "Men like Pollard don't quit. They regroup. They find another angle." "And the Mercers? Your father's got money and power. Losing one fight ain't gonna stop him." Silas finally met her eyes. "You know that better than I do." Josie was quiet for a moment. The morning light caught the gold in her eyes, made them look almost amber. "My father doesn't lose," she said softly. "He's never lost anything in his life. When my mother died, he didn't grieve, he calculated. Figured out how to use her death to gain sympathy to close a deal he'd been working on for months." Her voice hardened. "That's who he is. Everything is a transaction. Everyone is a tool. Including you. Especially me." She looked away. "I was supposed to marry a man who could expand his railroad interests. When I refused, I became a liability. When I found those documents, I became a threat." She paused. "He won't stop until that threat is eliminated." Silas stepped closer. "Then we make sure he can't." "How?" "He has lawyers, judges, politicians." Josie shook her head. "The documents help, but they're not enough to bring him down. Not completely." "What would be enough?" She hesitated. Silas saw something flicker in her expression, a thought she was weighing, deciding whether to share. "There's a ledger," she said finally. "My father keeps it in his study. It records every bribe, every payment, every illegal transaction he's ever made. Names, dates, amounts. If that ledger reached the right hands, a federal prosecutor maybe, or a journalist who couldn't be bought, it would destroy him." "Where's this ledger now?" "Boston, in his safe." "That's 2,000 miles away." "I know." Josie's jaw tightened. "But it's the only way to end this for good." Before Silas could respond, the sound of a wagon reached them. Both turned. Reverend Ashford was coming up the road, driving faster than a man of God probably should. He pulled to a stop and jumped down, face flushed. "We have a problem." Silas's hand went to his hip, where his pistol usually rested. "What kind?" "The kind that wears a federal marshal's badge." Ashford caught his breath. "2 men rode into town this morning. Real lawmen this time I checked. They're asking about Josie." Her face went pale. "Federal marshals?" "Your father filed charges. Claims you stole property and fled across state lines." The preacher's eyes were grave. "They've got authority to arrest you and transport you back east for trial." "That's a lie." "I know it is." Ashford held up a hand. "But they don't. And right now the law is on his side." Silas felt anger rise in his chest. "So he can't catch her with fake badges, he uses real ones. He's Harold Mercer. He knows how to play the system." Josie grabbed Silas's arm. "I have to run. If they find me here, they'll arrest you too for harboring a fugitive. I ain't letting you run alone. You don't have a choice. The hell I don't. Silas turned to Ashford. How long before they come here? An hour, maybe less. They're getting directions from Sheriff Morrison. Morrison's in Mercer's pocket. Everybody's in somebody's pocket. Ashford looked at Josie. There might be another way. Judge Harlan, the honest one I told you about, he's willing to look at those documents. If he believes they're genuine, he can issue an injunction. Block the arrest until a proper investigation is conducted. How long would that take? Days, maybe weeks. The preacher's expression was grim, but it's better than nothing. Josie stepped forward. Where is Judge Harlan now? Helena, about 30 miles from here. I'll go. Her voice was firm. I'll take the documents myself, if I can get to him before those marshals catch up. You won't make it alone, Silas said. Pollard's still out there somewhere, and your father might have other men we don't know about. Then come with me. The words hung in the air between them. Silas looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, the fear she was trying to hide, the strength that had carried her through horrors he could only imagine. He thought about his ranch, his horses, everything he'd worked for. Then he thought about what his father would have done. All right, he said, we ride. 30 minutes later, they were on horseback cutting across open country toward Helena. Silas pushed the pace as hard as he dared. The bay mares were strong, but they'd been neglected before he bought them. He couldn't risk running them into the ground. Josie rode beside him, the documents secured in a saddlebag. She handled the horse well, better than he'd expected. Where'd you learn to ride like that? My mother taught me. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Before she died, she used to take me out to our estate in Virginia. We'd ride for hours, just the two of us. It was the only time my father couldn't touch us. Sounds like she was a good woman. She was. The smile faded. Too good for him. I think that's why he never mourned her. She saw through him, knew what he really was. Is that why you turned against him for her? Josie was quiet for a moment. Partly, but mostly it was the Daltons. Who? A family my father destroyed when I was 16. They had a farm in Pennsylvania. Beautiful land, good soil. My father wanted it for a rail line. When they refused to sell, he had them evicted. Claimed they owed money on loans that never existed. Her voice went cold. The father tried to fight it in court. He lost everything. His wife died of fever that winter because they couldn't afford a doctor. The children were sent to an orphanage. Silas's jaw tightened. What happened to the father? He killed himself. Josie met his eyes. And my father bought the farm at auction for a fraction of what it was worth. I watched him celebrate that night with champagne. That's when I knew. Knew what? That I would never be like him, no matter what it cost. They rode in silence for a while. The sun climbed higher, the heat pressing down on them. After an hour, Silas spotted something on the ridge ahead. Riders, 2 of them. We've got company. Josie followed his gaze. Her face went pale. Is it the marshals? Can't tell from here. Silas slowed his horse. But they're between us and Helena. Can we go around? Not without losing hours. He studied the terrain. There's a canyon about a mile east, narrow, but it cuts through the hills. We can get past them without being seen. You know this land. I grew up here. He turned his horse. Follow me. They cut east, moving fast, but staying low. Silas led them into the canyon, its walls rising on either side, casting shadows that blocked the worst of the sun. They were halfway through when the shot rang out. Silas felt the bullet whiz past his ear. He grabbed Josie's reins and pulled both horses behind a boulder. Stay down! Another shot cracked against the rock, spraying fragments. Brennan? A voice echoed through the canyon. Familiar. Smug. Pollard. I knew you'd come this way, the voice continued. Only route that makes sense. You're predictable, Cowboy. It's your weakness. Silas drew his pistol and peered around the boulder. He could see two figures on the ridge above Pollard and one of his men positioned where they could fire down into the canyon. Where's the third one? He muttered. What? Pollard had 3 men. I only see 2. As if in answer, the sound of boots on gravel came from behind them. Silas spun. The third man stepped out of a side passage, rifle raised. Young, mean-faced, with a scar running down his cheek. Don't move. Silas calculated distances. Too far to shoot before the man fired. Too close to miss. Easy, Silas said, hands rising slowly. Just take it easy. Throw down the gun. Silas hesitated. Now. He dropped the pistol. You too, lady. Whatever you've got. Josie had a small derringer Hetty had given her. She laid it on the ground. The man gestured with his rifle. Move. Up the slope. Mr. Pollard wants a word. They climbed, hands raised, the man's rifle at their backs. At the top, Pollard waited with a smile that made Silas's skin crawl. Well, well. Pollard holstered his weapon. The lovebirds. How touching. This ain't over, Silas said. Oh, but it is. Pollard stepped closer to Josie. You've caused me a lot of trouble, Miss Mercer. Cost me money. Cost me reputation. Your father's very unhappy. My father can rot in hell. Pollard's smile widened. That's exactly what he said about you. He turned to his men. Search her. She's got papers. The scarred man moved toward Josie. Silas stepped between them. Touch her and I'll kill you. With what? Pollard laughed. Your bare hands? You're brave, Brennan. I'll give you that. Brave and stupid. The scarred man shoved Silas aside and grabbed Josie's saddlebag. He rifled through it, pulled out the documents. Got them. Good. Pollard took the papers, flipping through them. This is everything. Josie said nothing. I asked you a question, and I'm not answering it. Pollard's face darkened. He stepped forward and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. You think you're clever. You think these documents matter. But your father has copies of everything. He knows exactly what you took, and he knows exactly how to make it all disappear. He released her roughly. Including you. So why not just kill me? Josie's voice was steady, despite the fear in her eyes. Why all this? Because your father wants you alive. For now. Pollard's smile returned. He's got plans for you. A private asylum back east. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one will ever hear from you again. Silas felt cold rage flood through him. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. Pollard turned to his men. Tie them up. We're taking them to... The gunshot split the air. Pollard staggered, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. Everyone spun toward the source of the shot. Hetty Rawlings stood at the canyon rim, rifle raised, face hard as granite. Let them go. Pollard's men raised their weapons, but before they could fire, more figures appeared. Earl Hutchins, Reverend Ashford, half a dozen townspeople, all armed, all pointing their guns at Pollard and his men. What is this? Pollard snarled. This is justice. Earl stepped forward. We followed you from town. Figured you'd try something like this. You're making a mistake. Only mistake was letting you ride out the first time. Earl cocked his rifle. Drop your weapons, all of you. For a moment, it looked like Pollard might fight. Then he saw the numbers, saw the determination in the faces around him. His men dropped their guns. This changes nothing, Pollard spat. Her father has federal marshals. He has lawyers. You can't protect her forever. Maybe not. Silas picked up his pistol and walked toward Pollard. But we can protect her today. He took the documents from Pollard's hand. And these are going to Judge Harlan. By the time your boss finds out, it'll be too late. Pollard's face twisted with rage. You don't know what you're dealing with. Mercer will destroy this whole town. He'll burn it to the ground. Let him try. Silas stepped back. Earl, tie them up. We're taking them to the sheriff. Morrison's crooked. Then we'll hold them ourselves until a real lawman shows up. Silas looked at Josie. You all right? She nodded, but her hands were shaking. The documents? Safe. He touched her arm gently. You're safe. For a moment, she looked at him like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to pull her under. Then she straightened, took a breath, and became the strong woman he'd first seen at the auction, the one who had survived things that would have broken anyone else. We need to get to Helena. We will. Silas turned to Ashford. Can you take Pollard and his men back to town? Hold them somewhere secure. The church has a cellar, the preacher said. Strong walls, no windows. Good enough. Silas mounted his horse. Josie and I will ride to Judge Harlan. We'll be back by nightfall. Earl stepped forward. You want company? No, fewer riders, faster pace. Silas looked at the assembled townspeople, at Hetty, with her rifle, at Earl, with his quiet determination, at all of them, who had risked their lives for a stranger. Thank you, all of you, Hetty snorted. Just make sure you marry that girl proper when this is all done. I didn't save your hide just for you to waste it. Silas felt heat rise to his face. Josie's cheeks flushed. Go on, Hetty said, waving them off. Before I change my mind about letting you leave. They rode. Helena appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent. The town was bigger than Copper Hollow. More buildings, more people, more noise. Silas felt uncomfortable the moment they entered. He'd never liked crowds. Finding Judge Harlan's office took longer than expected. By the time they reached it, the sun was touching the western hills. The judge was a gray-haired man, with sharp eyes and a weary expression that spoke of too many years dealing with other people's problems. He listened as Josie laid out the documents, explained their significance, described everything that had happened. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. These are serious accusations, he said finally. They're true. I don't doubt it. Harlan picked up one of the letters, studying the signature. I've known Harold Mercer by reputation for years. Never trusted him. But reputation isn't evidence. These documents are evidence. They're a start. The judge set down the paper. But your father has resources, lawyers, friends in high places. He'll claim these are forgeries. He'll drag this through the courts for years. Josie's face fell. Then there's nothing. I didn't say that. Harlan leaned forward. I said it'll take time, but with these documents I can issue an injunction blocking your arrest. I can open a formal investigation, and I can make sure the right people in Washington hear about this. How long? Weeks, maybe months? The judge's expression softened. I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but it's the best I can do. Silas spoke for the first time. What about the marshals looking for her? I'll send word. Tell them the arrest has been stayed pending investigation. Harlan looked at Josie. You'll need to stay in the territory. No running. If you disappear, it undermines everything. I understand. Good. The judge stood, extending his hand. You're a brave woman, Miss Mercer. Your mother would be proud. Josie's eyes glistened. You knew her? I met her once years ago, a charity function in Boston. She was the only person in the room who seemed to actually care about the cause. He smiled sadly. She spoke of her daughter, said you had her spirit. Josie couldn't speak. She just nodded, gripping the judge's hand. They left as darkness settled over Helena. The ride back to Copper Hollow was quiet. Josie was lost in thought, and Silas gave her space. When they were halfway home, she finally spoke. Do you think it's really over? Silas considered the question. No. Men like your father don't give up easy, but we hurt him today. Maybe enough to make him careful. Careful isn't the same as defeated. No, but it's a start. They rode in silence for another mile. Silas. Yeah. What Mrs. Rawlings said about marrying. Josie's voice was hesitant. She was joking. You know that, right? You don't have to. I mean, you've already done so much. Was she? Josie looked at him startled. What? Joking. Silas kept his eyes on the road ahead. Because I've been thinking about it. Ever since the auction. Thinking about what? About what it'd be like. Having someone. Not being alone on that ranch. He finally looked at her. Having you. Josie's breath caught. I know it's too soon, Silas continued. I know you've got troubles that ain't anywhere close to finished. And I know you don't owe me nothing. Silas. He stopped. I've spent my whole life being told what to do, who to marry, how to behave. Josie's voice was barely above a whisper. You're the first person who ever asked me what I wanted. What do you want? She was quiet for a long moment. The stars were coming out now, bright and cold. I want to stop running, she said. I want a home, a real one. She looked at him. I want someone who sees me as a person, not a transaction. I see you. I know. Her eyes glistened. That's why I'm terrified. Of me. Of losing this. She gestured between them. Whatever this is. I've lost everything else. I don't think I could survive losing this too. Silas reached over and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. You ain't gonna lose me, he said. I don't know what's coming. I don't know how this ends, but I know I'm not going anywhere. Josie squeezed his hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she laughed a small, startled sound. What? Nothing. She shook her head. I just realized something. What's that? 3 days ago, I was being sold at an auction. I had nothing. No name. No future. She looked at him with something like wonder. And now I have hope. She said the word like it was foreign, like she was learning it for the first time. I forgot what that felt like. Silas smiled. Get used to it. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, hands still joined stars wheeling overhead. When the ranch came into view, the windows were lit. Hetty's wagon was parked outside. Looks like we've got company, Silas said. They dismounted and walked inside. Hetty Earl and the Reverend were sitting at the table, coffee cups in hand. They looked up when Silas and Josie entered. Well, Hetty demanded. Did he sign? He signed. Josie held up the injunction. The arrest is blocked, for now. A cheer went up. Earl clapped Silas on the back. Ashford said a quiet prayer of thanks. Hetty just smiled sharp and satisfied. Told you it'd work out. You didn't know that. I had faith. She looked at Josie. In both of you. The celebration was small but genuine. Food appeared. Hetty had brought a pie, Earl contributed whiskey. Stories were shared. Laughter filled the small house. And through it all, Silas watched Josie. He saw the way she relaxed bit by bit, the way her smile came easier, the way she leaned into the warmth of people who had chosen to stand beside her. She caught him looking once. Instead of turning away, she held his gaze. And in that moment, something passed between them, a promise, unspoken, but real. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The night grew late. Eventually, the guests departed. Hetty hugged Josie goodbye, actually hugged her, which made the younger woman's eyes go wide with surprise. You take care of that boy, Hetty whispered. He needs someone to keep him out of trouble. I'll try. Do better than try. Hetty pulled back, her eyes fierce. You're family now. That means something in these parts. Family. Josie stood on the porch watching the wagon disappear down the road, the word echoing in her mind. Silas appeared beside her. You all right? Yes. She took a breath. Better than all right. Good. He paused. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow's gonna be a long day. Why's that? Because we're gonna start fixing this ranch properly. He looked out at the dark hills. I've been holding on by my fingernails for years, doing just enough to survive. But if this is really gonna be a home, our home, it needs to be something worth keeping. Our home. Josie felt something warm bloom in her chest. I'd like that, she said softly. Silas nodded, then slowly, carefully, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Good night, Josie. Good night, Silas. He went inside. She stayed on the porch a moment longer, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, her father was plotting his next move. The battle wasn't over. Maybe it never would be. But right now, in this moment, she had something she'd never had before. A place to belong, people who cared, a future worth fighting for, and a man who saw her, really saw her, and chose to stay. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough. 2 weeks passed, and the ranch began to change. Silas worked from sunup to sundown, repairing fences, strengthening the barn, clearing the south pasture that had lain fallow for years. Josie worked beside him, matching his pace, never complaining, never asking for rest. They fell into a rhythm: breakfast together, work through the heat of the day, supper on the porch as the sun went down. They talked about small things at first: the horses, the weather, the price of grain in town. But slowly the conversations deepened. One evening, Josie told him about her mother's last days, how she'd held Josie's hand and whispered, "Don't let them make you small." Another night, Silas spoke about his father, how the old man had worked himself to death trying to save a ranch that had already been stolen from him. How Silas had found him, collapsed in the field, still holding the plow heart given out from strain and sorrow. They didn't touch often. A brush of hands passing tools, shoulders bumping as they walked. But each contact carried weight, promise, possibility. The town watched. People talked. Hetty reported the gossip with undisguised glee. "They're saying you've gone soft, Silas Brennan, taken in by a pretty face." "Let them talk." "Oh, I do." Hetty grinned. "Makes for excellent entertainment." On the 15th day, the letter arrived. Silas was in the barn when Josie found him, her face pale, hands trembling. She held out the envelope without a word. The seal was broken. She'd already read it. Silas took the letter and scanned the contents. His jaw tightened with every line. "He's coming." "Yes." "Harold Mercer, your father, coming here." "Yes." Josie's voice was barely a whisper. "He says he wants to negotiate. Says he's willing to drop all charges if I return the documents and agree to certain terms." "What terms?" "A private facility. Somewhere I can receive treatment for my delusions." She laughed bitterly. "He's calling it mercy." "It's a cage." "I know." She met his eyes. "But if I refuse, he'll come anyway, with lawyers, with marshals, with everything he has." Silas set down the letter. "When?" 3 days. He was silent for a long moment, thinking. "You're not going." "Silas." "I said you're not going." He stepped closer, took her hands. "We've got Judge Harlan's injunction. We've got the documents. We've got witnesses who know what Pollard did. My father has more. I don't care." His voice was fierce. "You're not a bargaining chip. You're not property. And I'll be damned if I let him walk in here and treat you like you are." Josie stared at him. Something shifted in her expression. Fear giving way to something else. Something fiercer. "Then what do? We don't run." Silas squeezed her hands. "We don't hide. We stand right here on our land and we make him come to us. Our land." He paused, realizing what he'd said. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Our land, if you want it." Josie's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this ranch ain't worth much without someone to share it." He swallowed hard. "I'm saying I don't want to face whatever comes next alone. I'm saying—" He stopped, frustrated. "Hell, Josie, I ain't good with words. Never have been. But you gotta know by now." "Know what?" that I love you." The words hung in the air, raw and honest. Josie didn't speak. Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to say it back," Silas continued quickly. "I know it's sudden. I know you've got no reason to trust." She kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, fierce, the kind of kiss that said everything words couldn't. When she pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "I love you too," she said. "God help me, I do." Silas pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. "Then we face this together. Together." They stood like that for a long time, the weight of what was coming pressing down on them, but something stronger holding them up. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Silas sent word to Earl and the Reverend. They came immediately, bringing others, men and women who had heard what happened, who had seen the truth of what the Mercers had done. By the time Harold Mercer's carriage appeared on the road, there were 30 people gathered at the Brennan Ranch. Silas stood at the front, Josie beside him. Behind them, the community of Copper Hollow waited. The carriage rolled to a stop. 2 men in suits climbed out, first lawyers by the look of them. Then came armed guards, 4 of them, hands resting on their weapons. Finally, Harold Mercer himself emerged. He was older than Silas expected, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the bearing of a man who had never been denied anything in his life. His eyes swept over the crowd, dismissed them, and landed on Josie. "Josephine." "Father." The word held no warmth, no recognition of kinship, just cold acknowledgement. Mercer stepped forward, ignoring the guns trained in his direction. "You've caused me considerable trouble." "You caused yourself trouble." Josie's voice was steady. "The day you decided to steal from honest people." "I built an empire." Mercer's eyes flashed. "Everything I've done has been for the family, for our legacy. Your legacy is blood and theft. It's progress." He waved a hand dismissively. "You wouldn't understand. You never did." "I understand perfectly." Josie stepped forward and Silas moved with her. "I understand that you've spent your entire life destroying anyone who got in your way. The Daltons, the Brennans, dozens of others, and now you want to destroy me too. I want to save you." Mercer's voice softened, became almost paternal. "You're ill, Josephine. These delusions about documents, about crimes, they're symptoms. I have doctors who can help. I'm not ill, and those documents aren't delusions." Josie pulled out the papers, copies she'd kept separate from the ones Judge Harlan held. "They're evidence, your own letters, your own signatures, everything you've done written in your own hand." Mercer's face went cold. "Those were supposed to be destroyed. They were supposed to be." Josie's smile was sharp. "But you underestimated me, the way you always have. Give them to me." "No." "Josephine." "My name is Josie." She lifted her chin. "I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm not your property, and I'm not going anywhere." Mercer's composure cracked. For the first time, Silas saw something beneath the polished exterior, rage, pure and ugly. "You think these farmers can protect you?" Mercer gestured at the crowd. "I have the United States government on my side. I have senators, judges, men who owe me everything." "You had them." A new voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned. A rider was approaching from the east. As he got closer, Silas recognized the uniform. A federal marshal, but not one of Mercer's men. The marshal dismounted and walked toward the gathering, a folded document in his hand. "Harold Mercer." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "Who's asking?" "Deputy Marshal James Thornton. I have a warrant for your arrest." The silence that followed was absolute. Mercer laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. "On what charges?" "Fraud, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder." The marshal handed him the document. Judge Harlan's investigation turned up more than documents. It turned up witnesses, people you paid to keep quiet who decided to talk. Mercer's face drained of color. "This is impossible." "It's justice." The marshal gestured to his men. 3 more riders appeared surrounding the scene. Your lawyers can fight it in court, but for now, you're coming with me. Mercer spun toward Josie, and for one terrible moment Silas saw murder in his eyes. You did this. You did it to yourself. Josie didn't flinch. The day you decided people were just pieces on your board. The day you sold your own daughter to protect your empire. I'll destroy you. His voice was a snarl. I'll destroy everything you love, every person here. I'll burn this town to the ground. No, you won't. The voice came from Earl Hutchins. He stepped forward, rifle in hand, face hard as stone. You see all these people, Mr. Mercer? They're not just farmers. They're not just neighbors. They're a community, and you threatened one of our own. Other voices joined in. Hetty's sharp agreement. Reverend Ashford's quiet affirmation. Dozens of others standing together. You can't buy us, Earl continued. You can't scare us. And you sure as hell can't destroy us. Because we look out for each other. That's what folks do out here. Mercer looked around at the faces, at the determination, the unity, the complete refusal to back down. For the first time in his life, Harold Mercer had no play to make. Marshal, he said stiffly, I'll come quietly. Smart choice. As the lawmen led him toward their horses, Mercer turned back one last time. This isn't over, Josephine. Yes, it is. She held his gaze. Goodbye, Father. He didn't respond. He just climbed into the marshal's wagon, his lawyers scrambling to follow his guards, dispersing like shadows in sunlight. As the wagon rolled away, Silas felt the tension drain from his shoulders. He looked at Josie. She was crying. Not from fear, not from relief. Something deeper, the release of years of pain. Years of running, years of carrying a weight no one should carry alone. Silas pulled her into his arms. She buried her face against his chest and let herself break just for a moment. Around them, the community watched in respectful silence. Then Hetty spoke up, her voice cutting through the emotion with characteristic bluntness. Well, that's done. Now can we please eat? I didn't bring all this food for it to go to waste. Laughter rippled through the crowd, startled, relieved, genuine. Josie pulled back, wiping her eyes, a smile breaking through the tears. She's right, she said. We should celebrate. Not yet. Silas took her hand. There's something I need to do first. What? He dropped to one knee. Josie's eyes went wide. The crowd went silent. I ain't got a ring, Silas said. I ain't got much of anything, truth be told. Just a ranch that's barely standing and a name that used to mean something. He looked up at her. But I've got a heart that's yours if you'll have it. I've got 2 hands that'll work every day to build us a life. And I've got a promise that as long as I'm breathing, you'll never be alone again. Josie's hands covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Josephine Mercer. Josie, will you marry me? For a heartbeat, she didn't speak. Couldn't speak. Then she laughed, a bright, startled, joyful sound. Yes. The word was barely out of her mouth before the crowd erupted. Cheers. Applause. Hetty's sharp whistle cutting through the noise. Silas stood, pulled Josie into his arms and kissed her. This time it was gentle. Tender. A promise. Sealed. When they finally broke apart, Earl was grinning like a fool, and the Reverend had actual tears in his eyes. I suppose you'll be wanting a wedding, Ashford said. Soon as possible. How about tomorrow? Silas looked at Josie. Is that too fast? I've been waiting my whole life for this. She squeezed his hand. Tomorrow isn't fast enough. And so the very next day, they stood in front of the small church in Copper Hollow, surrounded by everyone they'd come to call family. Josie wore a simple white dress that Hetty had altered through the night. Silas wore his father's best shirt, pressed and clean for the first time in years. The Reverend spoke words that had been spoken for centuries, words about love and commitment and the joining of 2 lives into one. But Silas barely heard them. All he could see was Josie, the way the light caught her hair, The way her eyes shone with tears she refused to let fall. The way her hand trembled in his, not from fear, but from the overwhelming rightness of this moment. "Do you, Silas Brennan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Josephine Mercer, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Josie's voice was steady, clear, certain. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Ashford smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Silas did. The church erupted in applause. And for the first time since she'd been sold at an auction like a piece of livestock, Josie felt the last chain fall away. She was free. She was home. She was loved. That evening, after the celebration had wound down and the guests had departed, Silas and Josie sat on their porch watching the sun set over the hills. Their porch. Their hills. Their home. "What are you thinking?" Silas asked. Josie leaned against his shoulder. "I'm thinking about the auction, about what that man said when he threw me in with the horses. That you were worthless." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "He was right, you know. In his world I was worthless. No papers, no name, no value that anyone could see. He was wrong. Maybe, but that's not the point." She looked up at him. "The point is that worth isn't something others give you. It's something you carry inside. Something that can't be sold or stolen or destroyed." "When did you figure that out?" "When you asked the auctioneer to untie me." Her voice softened. "No one had treated me like a person in months. And then, you, a stranger, a man who had nothing, you looked at me and saw someone worth saving." "I didn't save you." Silas shook his head. "You saved yourself. I just gave you room to do it." "That's not nothing." Josie took his hand. "That's everything." They sat in silence as the stars emerged one by one, filling the sky. "What happens now?" Josie asked. "Now we build." Silas looked out at the land at the ranch that had been in his family for generations, at the future spreading out before them. "We fix what's broken. We plant what needs planting. We make this place into something our children can inherit." "Children, if you want them." Josie smiled. "I want everything, with you." "Then that's what we'll have." He pulled her closer, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Somewhere out east her father would face trial. The empire he'd built on lies would crumble. The families he'd destroyed would finally see justice. But that was tomorrow's battle. Tonight there was only this, the warmth of the man she loved, the peace of a home she'd earned, the promise of a future she'd never dared to imagine. A year later, the Brennan Ranch was unrecognizable. The fences stood straight and strong. The barn had been rebuilt bigger and better. The south pasture, reclaimed through Judge Harlan's ruling, was lush with summer grass. And in the small house that Silas's father had built with his own hands, there was laughter. Josie stood in the kitchen, flour on her hands, trying to follow one of Hetty's recipes. It wasn't going well. "You're supposed to fold the dough," Hetty instructed, watching with undisguised amusement. "Not murder it." "I'm trying." "Try harder." Silas appeared in the doorway, grinning. "Something burning." "Your wife's pride," Hetty said. "But she'll learn." Josie threw a handful of flour at both of them, laughing despite herself. Later, after Hetty had gone and the kitchen was cleaned, Silas and Josie sat on the porch watching the sun go down. It had become their ritual. No matter how busy the day, no matter what challenges arose, they ended it here, together, watching the light fade and the stars emerge. "I got a letter today," Josie said. "From who?" "A lawyer in Boston. My father's estate is being liquidated. Everything he stole is being returned to the families he took it from." She paused. "Including your south pasture." Silas was quiet for a moment. "I already got the pasture back." "I know, but this makes it official. No one can ever challenge it again." She took his hand. "Your father's name is cleared. The debt that never existed, it's been erased from every record. Something loosened in Silas's chest, something he hadn't even realized he was still carrying. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. It was always the truth. I just made sure people saw it. He pulled her closer. My father would have liked you. I would have liked him too. She rested her head on his shoulder. I wish I could have met him. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded. Silas. Yeah. I need to tell you something. He looked at her. Her expression was soft, almost shy, an expression he rarely saw on the strong, fierce woman he'd married. What is it? She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. For a moment, he didn't understand. Then he did. You're... Yes. Silas stared at her speechless. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Are you happy? Josie asked, her voice uncertain. Happy? He laughed, a startled, joyful sound. Josie, I don't even have words for what I am. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully, now aware of the new life growing inside her. When did you find out? This morning. I wanted to wait until we were alone to tell you. A baby. He said the word like it was foreign, like he was learning its meaning for the first time. Our baby. Our baby. He kissed her gently, reverently, like she was the most precious thing in the world. Because she was. 9 months later, the house filled with the sound of a crying infant. Silas sat at Josie's bedside, holding his daughter for the first time. She was small and red, and perfect with a tuft of dark hair and her mother's eyes. What should we name her? Josie asked, exhausted but radiant. Silas looked at his daughter, at the future he'd never dared to hope for, now sleeping peacefully in his arms. Grace, he said, after my mother. Josie smiled. Grace Brennan, I like it. Grace Eleanor Brennan, Silas amended, after yours too. Josie's eyes filled with tears. Eleanor was my mother's name. I know, you told me. He leaned over and kissed her forehead. She deserves to carry both their names, the women who made us who we are. Josie reached up and touched his face. I love you, Silas Brennan. I love you too. Both of you. He looked down at his daughter again, marveling at the impossibility of this moment. 2 years ago, he'd been a broken man on a failing ranch, watching everything his family had built slip through his fingers. 2 years ago, Josie had been a woman without a name, sold like property, thrown away like she was nothing. And now here they were, a family, a home, a future. All because he'd looked at a woman in chains and seen something the world had missed. All because she'd looked at a struggling cowboy and seen something worth trusting. All because in a moment, when it would have been easier to walk away, they had both chosen to stay. That night, after Josie and the baby were asleep, Silas stepped onto the porch. The stars were out bright and endless, the same stars his father had watched and his father before him. He thought about everything that had led to this moment, the losses, the struggles, the choices that had seemed impossible at the time but had brought him here. He thought about the auction, about the way Josie had stood there silent and still waiting for the world to decide her fate. And he thought about what he'd learned since then. That worth isn't given, it's claimed. That family isn't blood, it's choice. That love isn't a feeling, it's an action, something you do every day in 1,000 small ways, building something stronger than any storm. The door opened behind him. Josie appeared wrapped in a blanket Grace cradled in her arms. Couldn't sleep. Too much thinking. He made room for her beside him. You should be resting. I'll rest later. She leaned against him, their daughter between them. I wanted to see the stars. They stood together in comfortable silence, 3 generations under one roof, watching the endless sky. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been at that auction? Josie asked. Sometimes. What do you imagine? Silas considered the question. I imagine I'd still be here, still struggling, still alone. He looked at her. But I'd be missing something I didn't even know I needed. What's that? You. He smiled. You and everything that came with you. The fight, the fear, the hope. He touched Grace's tiny hand. This. Josie's eyes glistened. I used to believe my life was over. That day at the auction I'd given up. I was just waiting for it to end. What changed? You asked them to untie me. Her voice was soft. Such a small thing. But it was the first time in months someone had treated me like I mattered. Like I was worth something. You were always worth something. I know that now. She looked up at him. Because you showed me. He kissed her forehead, then their daughter's. Come on, he said. It's getting cold. Let's go inside. They walked back into the warmth of their home, the home they'd built together, the home that had once been falling apart and was now filled with love and light and laughter. As Silas closed the door behind them, he took one last look at the stars. His father's words echoed in his memory. Courage ain't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. He'd been scared that day at the auction, scared of making a mistake, scared of taking on trouble he couldn't handle. But he'd done the right thing anyway, and because of that, everything had changed. He looked at his wife, at his daughter, at the life they'd built from nothing but hope and hard work and stubborn refusal to give up. They had started with nothing, and they had built everything. They had faced the worst the world could throw at them, and they had won. Not because they were stronger than their enemies, not because they had more power or more money or more connections, but because they had something those enemies would never understand. They had each other. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The woman who had been thrown in for free with 2 horses had found her true worth. The cowboy who had taken home something the world called worthless had discovered the greatest treasure of his life, and together they had built a love that would last for generations, a legacy not of wealth or power, but of courage, compassion, and the unshakable belief that every person, no matter how broken, deserves a chance to be whole. That was their story. And it was only just beginning.